All right, I want to talk about something that has been concerning me probably since January, probably since the inauguration. It's been a cause of concern for me. So that is the biggest threat to your Bitcoin. And it's an interesting thing to discuss right now, considering we've got a very, very favorable administration. We've got a very, very favorable political arena for Bitcoin. We've got a very, very favorable financial arena for Bitcoin. As you can see, we've got some really amazing things happening, right? In 2020, when I started buying Bitcoin, I had no idea that you would have a situation that inside of 5 years, you would have the President of the United States talking so positively about Bitcoin. So the work is happening, the work is being done, and then in that, something develops that will cause the biggest threat to your Bitcoin. And I think it will come from a place that you're not expecting it to come from. And so I want to just address this right now and talk about how I deal with this, how other people deal with this. It affects everyone, right? It's not a person-specific thing. First thing I want to say is congratulations to everyone who's managed to get to 1 Bitcoin. If you haven't gotten to 1 Bitcoin, you're screwing this whole thing up, right? We are dealing with a monetary network here. This is not a human network. I keep hearing people talk about, oh, I don't want nation states. I want people to buy Bitcoin. I don't want BlackRock to get involved. I want people. These people are simple-minded people, right? With $1,000 net worthers, simple-minded fools. These people, back in the good old days, wouldn't have had a right to vote, right? They don't think on a higher level. Bitcoin is a monetary network. I've been saying this for 1.5 years right now. By the way, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, you should have by now, right? If you're watching this, subscribe to the channel. Why? Because the harder and the faster you subscribe to the channel, it allows me to get the get to 1 Bitcoin message out to other people faster, right? The algorithm works like that. So please subscribe to the channel. The harder and faster you subscribe, the faster this video will be shown to other people and they can actually get there, right? As we've seen, I started talking about getting to 1 Bitcoin, in the 30s, I guess, right? And now we're at a point where less and less people can afford to get to 1 Bitcoin, and I want to keep that message alive for people. You have to get to 1 Bitcoin. You get to 1 Bitcoin or you die trying. Now, the main point here is that, we've seen Bitcoin is a monetary network. It is not a human-based network. It is a monetary network. What that means is your dollar or someone else's dollar is valued the same because it's a dollar, right? It is not the human. Where if Mother Teresa or anyone else that you perceive as a great human being, right, without getting political, right, because everything's political nowadays, whoever you perceive as a great human being, that person's $1 is worth the exact same as whoever the worst person you believe in human history buying Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is a monetary network. It is money for your enemies. It is money that doesn't judge who owns it, right? And that is one of the problems that we've had with this financial subjugation that people have faced, where you can direct and basically send the energy weapon of fiat currency towards certain people and away from certain people. Bitcoin doesn't judge. It's a monetary network. And by that standard, a billionaire putting $1 billion into Bitcoin is exactly the same as a billion people putting $1 into the network. Now, the happy hippies among us are going to sit there and go, oh, but the world would be a better place if it was the other way around and 1 billion people got into Bitcoin. Cool, whatever. Nobody cares what you think. You don't have the reach to care what you think. Bitcoin is a monetary network. It is not dependent on the people. It's not dependent on your judgment of the morality of the person. It is based on the dollars that enter the network. It's why BlackRock went straight from the base layer, the foundation where Bitcoin was built and strengthened, straight to the top. They skipped that $500,000 to $30 million net worth, which is my parents, right? This is where my parents exist. And that's why I turned the jets on explaining this message, because every one of those people is going to get screwed, right? It is imperatively important for me personally that the $500,000 to $30 million net worth people, the people that have spent 30 years doing the right thing, 40 years doing the right thing, paying their taxes, building a property portfolio, building a small business, etc., get to one Bitcoin and are safe. That's been the mission of this channel and my mission since I started, right? That's been my number one and only objective for even talking about Bitcoin. And I've been open to say it, right? If you're underneath that level, that's fine. The good thing about Bitcoin is all of the information is valuable to everyone, but my personal goal is to make sure that people like my parents, people that have spent all this time trying to build a legacy, a future for their children, gets protected a little bit, right? As much as possible. So, saying that, it is a monetary network, and therefore, the number one thing that you can do with Bitcoin is hold it. Hold it for as long as humanly possible. That is the ultimate goal. And I'm sure we all agree with that, right? If you're any ounce of a hodler, I know you already agree with that. But I want to reiterate that because that's where the biggest threat comes in. Because as Bitcoin goes up higher and higher, here's the threat. Everyone thinks the threat is going to come from China, from this, that, and the other. It's never going to be that. The threat in an environment where the president is behind Bitcoin, every senior appointee is a Bitcoiner. Larry Fink is a Bitcoiner. Michael Saylor is buying billions. They just got $21 billion more of ATM on strike to buy more Bitcoin. Billions of dollars are going to chase this asset. And as the price gets higher, the number one threat that you are going to face as a holder of Bitcoin in that $500,000 to $30 million category is you. You are the biggest threat. I, to myself, am the biggest threat. You are the biggest threat to yourself. Why? Because it's going to be seductive. BlackRock understands that they can pay you $1 million a coin and it doesn't matter because they're going to hit the pedal to the metal on the accelerator of the money printing going forward. Because guess what? This isn't real estate anymore. We don't have to worry about people jumping off roofs. We don't have to worry about the social element of going too far when it comes to money printing and financially engineering this asset. We don't have to worry about these things. We can go pedal to the metal and print all of the money that we want to print and shove it into Bitcoin, and there's no social implication of doing so. That's what's about to happen. Bitcoin's going through its securitization process right now. That is what's going to happen. And in this environment, BlackRock understands that paying you $1 million a coin is nothing. That's what BlackRock knows. And so they're going to do that. In fact, the cheapest way to get them to separate you from your Bitcoin is by just paying you. That's what it's always been. We'll just pay you enough, and then you will let go of what we want. So hodling is going to be the hardest thing. You cannot allow yourself to succumb to this. Now, that doesn't mean you can't enjoy life, right? I think you only have one life. There's 21 million Bitcoin. You have to enjoy that one life that you have. But hodling as much as you can for as long as you can is the goal when the asset actually has finality of scarcity. So the biggest threat is going to be you because they're going to throw as much money as possible at you to get you to sell that Bitcoin to them, right? Make no mistake. You sell your Bitcoin, and just like what's been going on in the last quarter, right? In the last maybe 2 quarters. It's the sub 5-year holders that are selling. It's the people that got in at 60, now we're at 100, and they're selling. They're selling their Bitcoin to MicroStrategy or Strategy, to BlackRock, to all the ETFs, to all the nation states that are involved, that are buying secretly. They're selling their Bitcoin to them. They're selling their Bitcoin to people that are never ever going to let go of their Bitcoin because we understand how to hold on to it. That's your biggest issue. And the number one thing that you should be focused on right now is understanding that you need income. It's not just about the hodl game. I know people think that the ultimate thing that you can do is hodl. And I had this conversation with someone who's a big proponent of hodling. And that's great. And they're also a big proponent of, selling down a little bit of their Bitcoin on a monthly basis to survive. And I told him this. I said, let's say I hold $1 million of Bitcoin and you hold $1 million of Bitcoin. Now let's say that in order to survive, we need, let's say, $5,000 a month of income, right? you're going to be selling down $5,000 every single month, paying the taxes on that, et cetera, et cetera. And I am going to be smart and use Wall Street's tools to generate a income of $5,000, which allows me to hodl the actual Bitcoin. Over the next 20 years, I'm way smarter than you, because you're actually going to sell. You're going to let go of the number one asset that you've managed to accumulate so much of, and now for the sake of an income, you are now going to sell down that overall position. The only thing that matters is how much of the Bitcoin network you hold, not how much of the dollar value that you hold. That's very important to understand, and I want everyone to pay attention to that. You cannot allow yourself to be put into a position where you have to go from, let's say you hold 1 Bitcoin, to now holding 0.98 Bitcoin because you needed an income. There's different ways of doing this, and that's one of the things I want to talk about, right? I want to talk about this over the next few videos, and why I'm mentioning this now, because income is very important. Bitcoiners don't like talking about it because, look, the reality is that, you know, if you want to use Wall Street's tools to generate an income, you're going to have to use Wall Street's tools, right? And this is the seductive nature of what's going on here. You think BlackRock's going to sit there and go, oh, we can just lend you money on your Bitcoin while you hodl it? There's no chance whatsoever. You will guaranteed get better rates by borrowing through because of IBIT rather than holding self-custody. It's one of the reasons why I said I wish I could short every private company that was offering like Bitcoin custody and lending solutions, because there's no way you can compete with BlackRock. I told 3 of them this, and they didn't like me for it. But the reality is, I wish I could have shorted them because they've got insane burn rates. They won't be able to survive because that market of people, like for example, if you can borrow against your Bitcoin, and because you get the privilege or whatever else, the ego of saying that you hodl your Bitcoin in some type of self-custody, you get to pay a 14% interest rate, whereas I, going through IBIT, get Fed rates plus 1%. I'm way ahead of you. The compounding on that is, I'm way ahead of you. That's where the smart money will go. It's just inevitable. So those businesses were absolutely dead, and I wish they were public because I would have bought put options on them. So look, the bottom line is this: income is very important. Many ways to generate income. I don't think anyone should be sitting there going, I own Bitcoin, so my life is completely fixed. You got to focus on multiple income generating strategies, right? You got to have either a job, a business, some way to add value, and then there are ways that you can use the Wall Street tools to generate an income as well, and taking a small portion of your portfolio, like I do, right? I have a business, I have all these other things, but I have a small portion of the portfolio in income, right? It's designed for income. And here's the thing, what I want to talk about in the next video is I want to talk about the sacrifices that you make as a result of focusing on income and why those sacrifices are worth it. So look, income is important. You are your biggest threat to the hodl. That's it. There is no one else. The president's behind Bitcoin, BlackRock's behind Bitcoin, nation states are coming, nation states are here. Everyone is aligned on Bitcoin. Every single appointee in the White House is a Bitcoiner. There is no better landscape for Bitcoin than right now, and the price is going to be seductive, and they're going to get you to sell. That's how they're going to get your Bitcoin. You are your biggest threat, and it's time to shore that up. Shore up your ability to hodl your Bitcoin so you can hodl it forever for the generation that comes after you, because that's what this is about, hodling that Bitcoin forever. I'm sure there were many people that owned Manhattan land and sold it because the price was right, and now their grandchildren are wondering, or their great-grandchildren are wondering, why the fuck they sold it. So that's the message. You are your biggest threat. Start thinking about this, and then the next bit, subscribe to the channel, because in the next video, I'm gonna start talking about some of these, different ways to generate income, because that is gonna be, the people that hodl Bitcoin the longest will be the ones that figure out how to make income so that they can hodl without letting go of their hodl stack, and that's what we need to start talking about. So subscribe to the channel, and ultimately there are always only 3 rules to Bitcoin. Step number 1, you buy Bitcoin. Step number 2, shut the fuck up. And step number 3, you get fabulously wealthy.